I didn't record all the material stuff. Let me get the YouTube going. Okay. So again, the hook we're going to use is a Sabre 5240, and it's a size 14. So take your hook and your bead. Now, if you have 70 denier thread, if some of you have the 7/64 bead, Peter, I think I mailed you a 7/64 bead as well. I didn't know whether you had larger thread or smaller. Go ahead and put your bead on the hook. Remember, put it small hole first. Put the point through the small hole of the bead. The slot should go toward the rear of the hook. And go ahead and get it in your vise. Now, if you will look, these fly shack beads don't show it quite, it's not quite as pronounced, but there is an orientation. Doesn't really matter that much, because sometimes I don't even pay attention to it, but there is an orientation to putting the bead on the hook. If you'll notice on the slot, if your eyes are good enough, there's a flat end of the slot and a curved end of the slot. Basically, it would be like a doorway with an arch at the top of it, is what it kind of looks like. That arch goes up on the bead. Again, if you don't do that, and I'm not going to bump my camera to try to do it here, there it goes right there. Again, it doesn't matter that much. But when you put the arch up, the bead snugs down to the eye of the hook a little bit better. Again, it's not a big deal either way. Now, the reason I mentioned that 140 denier thread would be better is for... I'm sorry?
Both colors?
No, I'm going to use 70 for the red, but it doesn't matter, Ronnie. I mean,
yeah, okay. 140 for the black.
Yeah. Normally, on a lot of these jig patterns like this, we will put 4, 5, or 6 wraps of lead wire right here behind the bead. And that, we push that wire up into the bead, and that helps stabilize the bead so it doesn't spin around on the hook all the time while we're tying and while we're fishing with it. But we're not using lead wire on this because it's a real slim pattern. It should sink really, really well without any lead wire. So the reason I asked for 140 denier is we're going to build a thread dam right behind that bead, and it's going to take 30 or 40 wraps of thread, and it builds up quicker with 170 denier than it does with 70. So we'll just get our thread started just behind the bead, and we normally go down the hook with it, but don't do that with this. We're going to stay right behind the bead, and I'm just going to spin the dog out of it right behind the bead until right against the bead. And you can stop. See, there's not enough yet. Just go. All right, now my bead is stable. I have the thread built up against my bead and it's stable. Normally lead wire would do that. So once you get your bead stable, bring your thread to about a bead width behind the bead itself and let it hang there. Now, you don't have to do that, but it aggravates me when the bead spins around while I'm tying and it's really sloppy on the hook. Okay, now our tail is pheasant tail. You should have a V-shaped piece of pheasant tail, so each side should tie one fly. So you have something that looks like this, and really 6 or 8 fibers is plenty for this. You don't want too many, but you certainly don't have to count them. But I'm going to grab just whatever that is. That's probably 8 or 9 fibers. Now you want to.
It's not a full point.
No.
Full end.
No. And what you want to do to keep the tips aligned, you want to pull the fibers 90 degrees from the stem. If you hold them 90 degrees from the stem, the tips will be pretty closely aligned. So I'm holding 90 degrees from the stem, and then I'm just going to pull them off the stem like that. And you can see my tips are pretty much aligned, fine. Now, if your tips aren't fairly well aligned, like if you have one sticking 1/4 of an inch out, you might want to adjust it a little bit. Now, our tail for this fly, we don't want it, it's kind of like his red dart. It's a fairly short tail. So you want the tail to be about a hook gap in length. So something, again, it's not, the exact measurement's not critical, but something about like that. So measure your...
That's the large end of the feather?
There's the tips. Those are the tips.
Those are the tips.
Yep, the large end is on the other end of the...
Okay.
Yep, so those are the tips. So our tips are fairly aligned, so I want to... And I'm going to intentionally put mine on here a little bit too long, because I'm going to show you how we're going to adjust that. So I'm now going to transfer I'm right-handed tire, transfer my left hand in, and I'm going to give it 3 kind of loose wraps. And then I'm going to look at it to kind of judge my length of my tail. And that's too long. So I can easily adjust this. All I have to do is just pull it forward until I get it about where I want, which is, about like that's fine. And once I get it where I want, go ahead and put your hand back on the tips and pull them up and towards you to keep them on top of the hook. So I'm pulling the tips up and towards me, and then make touching thread wraps back to the bend of the hook, which on this hook is about where the barb would be if it were a barbed hook. And that tail's still a little bit long, but it's fine. And then cut off your pheasant tail close. Cliff, we good? Jeff? Good? Okay, good.
Doing great.
All right, now let's grab our tinsel. And again, this is medium tinsel. And it can be a little aggravating to tie on too, so you want to grab it and have, maybe a 1/2 inch outside your fingers. Yeah, maybe a 1/2 inch outside your fingers. And notice I have it tilted at a downward angle and kind of under the shaft of the hook, under the shank of the hook. Because when I wrap my thread up, it's going to pull it, it's going to pull it up to the top. So I'll start with it underneath. And again, just like I adjusted my feathers, I pull that tinsel back so as, oops, I lost it, pulled it back too far. I want to pull that tinsel back to where it's just behind the bead, just about like that. And then make touching wraps forward. And so now I have tinsel.
Do we have to worry about which side is that tinsel?
I don't think so, Jim. It looks pretty much the same. Whoops, I'm bleeding here. All right, so now we take our tinsel and we make overlapping wraps forward with it. Now, yeah, if you can't see the overlapping wraps, kind of a technique to use is just make sure you don't give on your wraps too much of an angle. Make sure you just pitch the thread just a little bit and it will automatically overlap. In other words, I'm just barely off vertical with my tinsel. And you'll get a nice overlap if you do that. And I can't see if I've got gaps. Y'all can see if I'm making a mistake, but I can't see that. And we want to wrap all the way up to our thread. I love that green shine of this tinsel on. That's pretty cool looking.
Very bloody.
Yep. So when we get to our thread in the front, we take a couple of wraps behind the tinsel, cinch it down, and make a couple of wraps in front of the tinsel and trim it off. Am I still in focus here? Yep. Yep. All right, now we change thread colors. So do a little, just a 3 or 4 turn whip finish right behind the bead with the black thread. Doesn't have to be much because we're going to wrap thread on top of it. Okay, and then let's start our, now I'm using 70 denier for the red, just because I don't like a big, large hot spot, and the 70 denier doesn't build up quite as quickly. But if you're using 140 for the red, it's perfectly fine.
So trim off
The black thread, yep.
black thread.
Yep, and then start right behind the bead with your red thread. And don't go back too far with your red, just maybe not even a full bead width back. So I am, half a bead back, I guess. And we're almost finished. Build about, and remember, with dubbing, less is more. That's what happens when you gouge your thumb with razor scissors. Less is more. So I am building a fairly thin dubbing noodle, about an inch long, inch and a quarter long, and that's too, I can already tell that's too much dubbing. There we go, much better. That's a little too much dubbing, but it's fine. Build a small hot spot, and then whip finish it again, and we're finished. Definitely want to put some head cement on it. That thorax is a little...
Do you get epoxy on those wraps?
Yes. Catch mentioned, can you put epoxy on those wraps? Absolutely. This thorax is like way fatter than I like them. So see, I violated my own rule while I was talking. Put too much dubbing. I really like it about like this other one I tied, about like that is the way it should be. Yeah, if you put, right after you cut off your black thread, if you have UV, like some thin UV resin, you can coat the body with it, and it would be almost indestructible after that. Jeff, Cliff, we're good?
How's the dubbing go on?
About an inch noodle, thin noodle about an inch long. Yeah, mine looks pretty bad too. Too fat.
And you tie it on and you just wrap the...
Yeah, just spin it on your thread.
Okay.
Yeah, just roll it onto your thread about it, like I say, about an inch long. And your thorax should be about the same size as your bead. You can see mine's a little bigger here, so it's a little too big actually. But the fish won't care. And I'm going to drop a little head cement on the back of mine.
That'll work.
I think that'll catch fish, Carl.
I know it will. Throw it for this fish.
It's crazy.
I'm gonna count on the red being the attractor.
Yeah. So I said, once you get rolling with this fly, it's probably less than 5 minutes per fly. It's quick time. Real quick time. Once we're through with that one, let's do another one. All right, look at that. We go back. All right, let's start on copy number 2. Remember, thread your bead, small hole, the point goes into the small hole.
I've lost my tinsel.
Uh-oh. I hate to hear that, Carl.
Santa got it.
That's a crisis. Poison everywhere. Someone's floating across.
All right, I go back to my black thread, and again, I'm gonna build a little quick thread dam right behind the bead. And I've never counted it, but it's probably 20 or 30 wraps, or probably 30 or 40 wraps.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go. And leave that thread hanging
Oh, there he is. Oh, probably right.
about a bead back. And we'll stop here to let everybody catch up. Now you could certainly use lead wire on this fly if you wanted to. It would make a paper fly instead of a straight fly that you have. In other words, right behind the bead here, you could wrap 4 or 5 wraps of probably 015 lead wire, and it would make a more tapered body. But this thin body should sink, particularly this 8-inch bead should sink like a rock. Should really sink well. All right, so pheasant tail is next. Grab you 6 or 8 fibers and remember to pull it at 90, get it to 90 degrees from the shaft of the feather before you pull it, like so. And your tips will be aligned, and we want, again, a relatively short tail. About like that. Make touching wraps while holding those feather fibers up and towards you. And then trim off your excess. Now it's my turn to try to find my tinsel. Okay, there it is. All right. Bless you.
Here goes everybody's tinsel.
That's it, gone.
Tinsel is gone. All right, now hold the tinsel kind of under the shaft of the hook, so whenever I bring my thread up, it brings it up close to the front. Pull it to where it's behind the bead, and then wrap your thread all the way forward to behind the bead. I like flies like this. You can sit down and turn out a half dozen of them in probably a half hour. So we're on the little mow, and this is the only thing that worked that day. That night, you can crank out some more of them. All right, so make overlapping. Now, if you have a rotary vise, this is a really easy, good time to use it. You just hold your tinsel just off vertical and spin your vise, and you'll automatically get your overlaps. But I'm not going to use my rotary function here because we don't all have that. And again, hold that tinsel just off vertical.
It goes down.
I'm getting plenty of overlaps here.
I believe my tinsel's about twice as wide as this. Mine is Flashaboo or something like that, I forget what it's called.
Yeah, Flashaboo would be, I mean, it can be a lot wider than this. But, you probably lose, if you use too wide of a tinsel, it's easier to tie, but you probably lose some of that segmented look on it. Not that that makes any difference, I'm not sure if it does or not, but it just looks pretty cool. And this is relatively easy to use, but believe me, you do not want to try to use the small.
Small, like 18s or something?
You could probably tie 18s or 20s under a magnifier with the small tinsel, but it's hard to overlap. All right, so once you get your tinsel tied off, go ahead and whip finish and cut your black thread. Cut your black thread and start your red thread right behind the bead. All right. And once you get your red thread, I'm going to try to do it the right way this time. Yeah, it's better. Whip finish, and you're good to go.